Rand hit 6.55 against the greenback yesterday, despite all the drama that was playing out on the political front in the US. And of course, I'm alluding to the Osama bin Laden story. Apart from that, we have seen a bit of weakness coming to the fore as well. What is driving the local currency at this point? We have been, of course, away for a few public holidays over the last 2-week period.
Morning, Eleni. Well, as you mentioned, the Rand certainly has started off with on a weakening bias at the beginning of the week. Really, it's been driven by some increased appetite for risk in the past week, but we've seen that somewhat abate. We saw US markets close down yesterday, also seen softer commodity prices, and also the dollar stopped weakening, and that explains why the Rand is weaker this morning. But looking forward, if this Rand weakness is sustained, then we'd look to see a move down to 673. On the other hand, it's also possible that the Rand could strengthen from these levels, and then we'd be looking for a move to 643. The problem is, as you mentioned, there have been quite a number of public holidays, both domestically and internationally, and the Rand's recent strength has occurred amid some very thin trading volumes. So it makes it very difficult to assess what the prevailing market sentiment is.
Well, it's quite fascinating. I mean, you mentioned that the dollar is not weakening to the extent that it was a couple of days ago. Talking about the Rand weakening to 673 or perhaps strengthening to 643. What is going to determine the Rand's performance going forward? Is it about the foreigners buying bonds in South Africa? What is going to determine the factors going forward? I mean, we've got PMI today, we've got the Bank of England and the ECB meeting later this week. We had the Royal Bank of Australia meeting today, keeping rates unchanged, and then we had India hiking rates by 50 basis points.
Well, as you mentioned, there's quite a bit of data that could affect the Rand's developments, but what is always key to the Rand's movement is international sentiment, and particularly risk aversion or risk appetite. So we've seen foreigners continue to invest in SA bonds and equities this month, but despite that, the Rand has been weaker against most currencies, with the exception of the US dollar, the Turkish lira, and the Brazilian real. So as I indicated, today will certainly be a very key day because South African markets will be catching up with international developments. So by the end of today, we'd be able to ascertain whether the Rand's weakening bias will remain entrenched or whether we could see further Rand strength in the short term.
With regards to the PMI number, which is set to be released later on today, what are you expecting, given the fact that the previous month we did see a little bit of a disappointment?
Well, we'd be expecting a further improvement in the PMI, Eleni. This would be the PMI for April. So in line with the general improvement in economic conditions, as well as increased consumer spending, we'd be hoping to see a further improvement in the PMI. And in fact, for the remainder of this year, we expect the PMI to maintain this upward trajectory.
We also had trade numbers out on Friday, and of course money supply out on early Friday as well. With regards to the trade numbers, any surprises there? Because we did see a surplus coming to the fore as opposed to the deficit that we saw previously. Is it something that we could say is going to be a trend that can remain intact? We know these numbers are usually very volatile.
Well, the numbers are very volatile. So in the event, we saw a surprise trade surplus of nearly R1 billion, and that's in sharp contrast to the deficit that was predicted of also nearly R1 billion. What was key in the numbers is the fact that there was a very sharp fall in petroleum imports, and that would be primarily oil, and this occurs despite the fact that there was an increase in the oil price. So because the numbers are largely affected by the timing of shipments, it's highly possible that we could see a sharp reversal in this trend in the next month's numbers, and that could result in even larger than expected deficit.